All right, good morning. Welcome to Unveiling the Data INREC Nutrient Reduction Survey Results and Insights. I'm Ben Gleason, the Executive Director for the Iowa Nutrient Research and Education Council. That's a mouthful, so that's why we say NREC or Iowa NREC. We're glad to have you. Thanks for being here. We've got a lot to go over, so we'll get right in. We're gonna kick it off with a welcome from our board president, Roger Zylstra. I've known Roger for many years. He's a farmer in Jasper County, former president of Iowa Corn, and the current president of the NREC Executive Board. So take it away, Roger.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining this webinar today. We're pleased to share this information in a new way. This is something that we haven't done before, and we're really looking forward to the opportunities to be able to share the information that's been collected over the past several years that show that our voluntary programs are working. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Roger. We're going to start with the Iowa Secretary of Agriculture, Mike Naig. Mike grew up on a family farm in northwest Iowa, Buena Vista County near Cylinder. He's a graduate of Buena Vista University, been involved in agriculture all his life and continues to be involved in the family farm. He was elected the 15th Secretary of Agriculture in November of 2018, re-elected in 2022. He's committed to expanding trade opportunities and growing markets, protecting our natural resources, advocating for Iowa's youth, and making Iowa an even better place to live and work and raise a family. He was also deputy secretary before he became secretary, and is also the current co-chair of the hypoxia task force representing the states, and on the other co-chair would be the Environmental Protection Agency representing the federal agency. So Mike is no stranger to the nutrient reduction strategy, and we really thank him for his leadership and support in all the projects that IDOLS is leading and supporting and continues to develop. So take it away, Mike.
Hey, thanks, Ben, and thank you, Roger, for your leadership. And so good to see both of you this morning, and really excited that you all are presenting the survey results in this format, in this way. Of course, it's really important. And now in, I believe, year 7 of finding this kind of working on this kind of research and this kind of measuring. I remember well, I was in the deputy secretary role at the time, and having those initial conversations with Agribusiness Association, with Iowa State University Extension, Dr. Lawrence, and others about how could we gain this kind of insight? How could we find what was happening in fields, in practice across the state of Iowa, and how could that then we can track that over time? And there's tremendous value in that. Farmers and folks can benchmark themselves against others. There's value in that. And of course, what we're always trying to do in terms of taking what we're measuring is to then use that information to hone our programs and our projects, and either through geographic targeting or learning how to refine our approaches and how to improve practice performance. It's such an important part of what we're doing here in implementing the nutrient reduction strategy, which is science-based. We need to then go to the next level and be innovative in how we're actually getting these practices incorporated all across the state of Iowa. You mentioned, Ben, the fact that I'm co-chair of the hypoxia task force. My predecessor, Bill Northey, was as well. Iowa has been the chair now for many, many years. And I think that's right. We view ourselves as it's a responsibility we have. It's a role that we can play to help lead and to represent the states across the Mississippi River Basin, and to share ideas and to share challenges and work together, and then to coordinate with the federal family, EPA, USDA, et cetera, on how we can actually get even more work done. And when it comes to that in the state of Iowa, I'm proud of the fact that together we are setting records when it comes to conservation adoption. As I like to say, not setting records for talking about conservation or writing papers about conservation. We're actually setting records for getting it done. And that is because of the tremendous effort of many, many partners, including the NRCS, the Soil and Water Conservation Districts, county supervisors, but private sector partners as well. Over 350 different partners now engaged in projects and efforts to actually get conservation work done. And that's something we can all collectively be very, very proud of. So in particular, I want to thank NREC for the work that you've done on this, but other projects as well, involved in implementation projects now for several years as well. So this is important work. Can't stress enough how important it is to have Iowa State University, Matt Helmers, and the team that are giving the scientific basis, the credibility, because it's done in a way that's statistically significant, because it's done with that research lens, that you can be confident that these numbers are meaningful and we can use them accordingly. And so I want to thank Iowa State for always being there with that scientific backstop to continue to prove out what we're doing. So with that, I'll close. I'm excited to see the results today. Thanks to the team for all the hard work to get to the point where you can announce these results and this analysis today. And I want to wish everybody who's on the call here today a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and a wonderful, productive, safe New Year. So thanks, Ben, and I'll kick it back to you.
Thanks, Mike. Again, thanks for your leadership in all these efforts, and we look forward to continuing the survey. But for now, we're going to dive right into some of the survey results. All right, hopefully that looks good. So like I said, we're going to talk about the 7 years of survey results. We'll talk a little bit about sort of our methodology, but really we're focusing on the results. We've got a variety of results across all these practices, from 2023 results, 7-year averages, and also some trends. And one of the reasons why this survey was developed is we had been relying strictly on cost share data to measure practice adoption. And we know that farmers do a lot of conservation practice on their own without any assistance. So we wanted to figure out how to develop that a methodology to measure that as well. So again, this is just beyond cost share data and fulfilling a much more comprehensive measurement. So first, we'll talk really quick about INREC and who we are. Our purpose is to be a credible, unified voice for measurements and data to demonstrate progress on the Iowa nutrient reduction strategy. The nutrient reduction strategy was released in 2013. Its overall goal is to reduce phosphorus and nitrogen loads by 45% in an effort to reduce the dead zone or the hypoxia zone in the Gulf of Mexico at the mouth of the Mississippi River, but also improve Iowa water quality as well. INREC was founded shortly thereafter to support these efforts through science-based solutions and collaboration across Iowa agriculture. So progress measurement, like I've mentioned, is a big priority of ours, and we've developed this first of its kind system using ag retailer sales data and farm records to track progress on a subset of practices. We're focused on in-field practices that the ag retailer is going to know about. We'll go into that in detail, but we also do some work on the research side as far as researching new practices, technologies, products, services for their nutrient reduction performance. And then also on the education and outreach side, which we're doing here today. So we'll start with sort of our methodology from the statistical side. We work with ISU Statistics Department, the Center for Survey Statistics and Methodology, to develop this survey. So when we started, we had a master list of about 600 ag retail locations across the state. So you can see those blue dots is sort of our original list. And now some of that has changed over the years as we have mergers, or some of these locations may not sell fertilizer anymore. It may be just a grain or a seasonal facility. And then also you see the black lines for what we call major land resource area. So those are areas with similar soils, topography, etc. And we stratify our samples across these regions based on the amount of row crops, corn and soybean acres in those areas. So you can see the Des Moines lobe there in the middle, or the Prairie Pothole region has a lot more blue dots than the rest of the state. So we take more samples, we select more locations in that region compared to, say, the far northeast Iowa, the driftless area, very hilly topography. We take a lot fewer samples there just because there's not as many row crop acres. So then the stat lab does the random selection, and so we end up with 150 locations that we attempt to visit. We have 4 regional survey liaisons that make calls, contact the locations, try to set up a visit, and then go through our survey. So typically, like I said, not all these locations sell fertilizer or offer agronomy services anymore. So we typically get about 100 of the 150 to complete the surveys. Our statistical target for the whole state is 500 surveys, and we typically get closer to 1,000. So we oversample, and we also have statistical targets for those major land resource areas. So that's where we try to stratify things and do things according to what the stat lab tells us to do. So we have about 26 questions we ask at each location, and we randomly select 10 of their farmer customers and 10 of their or one of their fields. So 10 samples at each location. We ask about crop rotation. So we have extended rotations that might be corn and soybeans, and then a few years of a forage crop like alfalfa after the row crops. We're looking more at small grains and integrating those into the crop rotation. Extending those rotations helps reduce nutrient loss. We ask about cover crop use, and then specifically which species. We ask about nitrogen application practices. This includes rate, the use of nitrification inhibitors with fall anhydrous ammonia application. We ask about timing of either fall, spring pre-plant, or the in-season side dress, and then also a variable rate application. On the phosphorus side, we also ask about variable rate. This is a new question we added in 2019. The survey started in 2017, but every year we refine the questions working with the science team at Iowa State, Dr. Helmers and Dr. Eisenhart. We also ask about soil sampling, and then incorporation, whether that phosphorus that is applied sits on the surface or gets incorporated in the soil. And then tillage, tillage is an important practice as far as phosphorus reduction. As if we can reduce soil erosion, we reduce phosphorus loss. So reductions in tillage help us accomplish that. So we ask about whether it's conservation tillage, no-till, or conventional tillage. And we define conservation tillage as 30% or more residue left in the field. That includes strip till. And then we ask a little bit about manure. What is the source of the manure, whether it's swine or dairy or poultry or beef? And then for swine, we ask, what is the timing, fall, spring, or both? So that's all the questions we ask, or the practices. We're not going to go into all of these. We certainly don't have time for 7 years for each of the questions. So we're going to hit a subset of that. So we're going to talk first about corn and soybean acres across the state over the years. This is not our data. we use the CDL, which is the Cropland Data Layer from USDA. This is the data we use to stratify our samples. We get those row crop acres by regional area. And like I said, that's how we stratify our sample. But you can see over the years of our survey since 2017, row crop acres have been fairly steady, about 13 million acres of corn, almost 10 million acres of soybeans for a total of about 23 million acres. That really hasn't fluctuated a whole lot, maybe a percent or two from year to year. But it is a large driver of nutrient loss just because of the annual row crop system. Next, we'll talk about cover crops. Cover crops are one of the few practices that do double duties for both reducing nitrogen and phosphorus loss. We've seen dramatic increase, over doubling of the acres from 1.6 million in 2017 to over 3.8 million acres in 2023. So that's a great progress and a really strong trend, and we hope to continue to see that. And again, these are not just cost shared acres. This is all cover crop acres. And like I said, we ask about species. So in 2023, cereal rye continues to dominate the species used. And if you talk to anyone who uses it, you know, it germinates well, and for the most part is easy to terminate. It's relatively cheap, and it does the job. So, and then here are the acres across all 7 years of the survey. So a really strong trend, but also, you know, the increase varies from year to year, but is averaged over a 300,000 acre increase across those 7 years. Next, we have our nitrogen practices. We'll start with rates. We've seen sort of a up and down. We started, you know, 170 for corn in rotation with soybeans and 200 for continuous corn. That peaked in 2020 and then has decreased since then. So now back below where we started at 166 and 185. So certainly some economics at play regarding fertilizer prices, but I think we're seeing some practical, rational decision making on our farmers, both for productivity and economics, but also making sure we're applying the right rate. Variable rate nitrogen. Again, this is a question added in 2019. This is not yet an approved practice. We don't have enough data that shows a distinct, significant nutrient reduction performance from this. We're still working on that. I think we still are working on figuring out where, when you're doing variable rate, to apply more or less based on whatever factors. But we're seeing an increased adoption of this technology. So we expect, you know, more precision and managing our fields by the acre, not, you know, just by the field. And then I mentioned we ask about timing. We see a large diversity in timing from fall only, spring only. We even see a little bit of in-season only, and then combinations of all three of those practices. But the dominant by far is spring pre-plant on its own, averaging 43.8% of our nitrogen applications over our 7 years. So this is an important nutrient reduction practice to shift from fall to spring to reduce nitrogen losses. And then we ask about inhibitor use. specifically with fall applied anhydrous ammonia that has increased. This is a practice that reduces nitrogen loss by 5% compared to fall application without an inhibitor. Again, this is the practice that is approved by the science assessment. We get a lot of questions about spring or in-season use, but for now, the practice that is approved is for fall. Next, on the phosphorus side, we've seen a really good key achievement compared to our baseline period of 1980 to 1996. We've seen phosphorus loads modeled off the adoption of practices reduce the phosphorus load by 30%, leaving the state. So a lot of that is, if you think back to the 80s and the amount of tillage that was done, including moldboard plow and who knows how many passes across the field compared to today, we've reduced soil loss and with it phosphorus reduction. And then on top of that, we'll talk about this is a lot of becoming more precise using soil sampling and variable rate technology and other methods to reduce our phosphorus loss, but making great progress there based on a load reduction modeled off of practice adoption. So here's the variable rate applications, much higher than the nitrogen side, making good progress. Again, not an approved practice, but we hope it will be soon. Certainly helps farmers become more precise. And again, I think we have some more to learn on where do you apply more, but really if you have a high soil test phosphorus level, working to draw that down will reduce your nitrogen loss or phosphorus loss, excuse me. And then just sort of a timing / rate question, when do you do a phosphorus application? We're seeing a lot of 90+% over those years. Those phosphorus applications are only when soil test levels are at or below optimum levels. So that averages out to about 92.4% over the 7 years. Phosphorus applications only at or below optimum soil test levels. So great job from our ag retailers to the farmers to the soil labs on making soil testing easier. And now we're going, even more precise with GPS and heck, now there's robots and other stuff being developed. In addition to our management practices, like I said, cover crops do double duty for nitrogen and phosphorus. And I've mentioned the tillage, reducing soil loss, reduces phosphorus loss. So here's just a snapshot on cover crops and then also no-till. So that leads us into the tillage practices. So here's 2023 across both corn and soybean acres. You can see no-till is the dominant, followed by conventional tillage, and then conservation tillage. So if you split it between corn and soybeans, about a third of the corn acres are using no-till, and about 50% of the soybean acres are using no-till based off our 2023 crop year survey. And then when you throw in the conservation tillage, such as strip till, we're up to almost 63% of our acres using no-till or conservation tillage. So that brings us kind of to a summary, looking just at our survey results and the infield practices. Are we making progress? And I would say yes, we are. Certainly, we have a lot more work to do to reach our ultimate goals, and it'll certainly involve more than just infield practices, talking about, land use, edge of field practices, etc. And when we're looking at, trying to compare years, that matters what years you're comparing as far as whether you think we're making progress. Our baseline years are 1980 to 1996. The strategy was released in 2013. 2020 to 2021, we had a global pandemic that shocked our supply chains, and certainly, I think if you looked at some of our data, like cover crops, I think it affected the adoption of some of that stuff. Just concerns about, you know, termination, being able to get herbicide for that, and then scale matters, of course, as well. So it's going to take the larger the scale, the longer it's going to take to see progress. Whether we're talking about the Gulf of the Mexico, or moving closer to our Iowa rivers, or even a local lake or pond. So we'll have lots of work to do, but I'm really encouraged by the progress we're making, and certainly want to thank all the farmers, agronomists, ag retailers, and all the partners involved in making this happen. So I think, are about on time. Do we have any quick questions?
Ben, there is one that we could answer here.
Okay.
It says, the question is, we've heard some discussion that cover crop acres may have leveled off or even decreased in 2024. When will that data be available?
That is a good question. So our survey for the 2024 crop year will begin this January. We've done our random selections. We've got our liaisons. We're gearing up to make those visits. So we will conduct the survey this winter. We will aggregate the results, clean it up, all the data this spring, and then we turn it over to the statistics department. They do their statistical processing over the summer, and then we'll get the results. So, and then the other thing to note, when we talk about cover crops for, say, the 2023 crop year, those would have been planted in the fall of 2022. So any cover crop plantings this past fall for 2024, fall of 24, will not get accounted for until we do the 2025 crop year. So it depends on what fall and the associated crop year you're talking about. And so if it's the crop year you're talking about, it takes us, almost a year to do our survey and things like that. We wait until the winter when the retailers are less busy to conduct the survey, and then go through our process. So if they're talking about this fall, it'll be a lot longer. If they are talking about the 2024 crop year and cover crops planted in 2023, then we will have those results. We're gathering those results very soon. All right, we'll keep moving here. I'm going to introduce Dr. Matt Helmers. He's in the Ag Engineering Department at Iowa State. He's also the director of the Iowa Nutrient Research Center. He also is a co-lead of the science team for the nutrient reduction strategy for Iowa State University. So I will turn it over to Matt. Thanks.
All right. Thanks so much, Ben, and thanks for the introduction earlier, Secretary Naig, and also Roger. I get the great fortune to get to work with INREC on a lot of things, and so it's exciting to talk about this today, and kind of how we with Iowa State University and the Iowa Nutrient Reduction Strategy use some of the information that INREC collects. I guess a little background. I was even looking at the nutrient reduction strategy as Ben was talking. I was looking at the nutrient reduction strategy and what was laid out as future research needs. And one of the items specifically on the nitrogen was better estimates of actual nitrogen application rates, and on a geographic specific basis. So over 10 years ago, really identified the need to try to to better understand in-field practices that maybe we can't, track as well with remote sensing or any other technique. And so we're really fortunate to be able to work with NREC on this. So I'm going to give kind of just a little background on the measurement project for the nutrient reduction strategy, which I think plays into how we utilize the data that Ben and his group collect. The measurement project is led by the technical leads of the nutrient reduction strategy, IDALS, DNR, and Iowa State University. And it's really a collaborative process. The reporting for the measurement is a collaborative process. Probably many on this webinar get contacted about reporting various aspects related to the nutrient reduction strategy. The reporting on nutrient reduction strategy impacts are available on the INRS tracking dashboard. From 2014 to 2020, comprehensive reports were released. Multiple pages, dozens and dozens of pages of reports. In 2020, went to a data dashboard. And so that QR code would take you to the interactive data dashboard where you can find information about the tracking of practices. This is a good, I think, transparent way that we within Iowa are sharing information about the nutrient reduction strategy. You can download information from the dashboard. As we look at the nutrient reduction strategy, the measurement is really guided by a logic model. And just going to walk through this quick because it relates to the information that NREC is collecting. Ultimately, what we want in the state of Iowa is we want water with less nutrients in it. That's our goal with the nutrient reduction strategy. That's the goal for the hypoxia task force. We report that by calculated load reduction and measured loads and priority watersheds or at existing monitoring stations. But we recognize that for us to see and explain changes in the water that might happen, we need to know about what's happening on the land. We need to know information about land use practice adoption. And for us to ultimately get land use change, we need changes in farmer knowledge and attitude. We need partner organizations, partner agribusiness on board, like we have today, to get those changes in the land use. For us to get kind of changes in the human side, we need inputs, people, funding, agency resources, private sector resources like we have here. And we've started to get a lot more of those inputs as we look at the time since the nutrient reduction strategy was released. But relative to the NREC survey, they are critical to capturing some of that land information that we can then take to estimate or calculate a load reduction from those practices or changes in practices. So, on the practice tracking on the ag land side, we want to capture information on land use changes. And as I said before, from the nutrient reduction strategy science assessment, there was an identified need to understand in-field practice adoption, including things like tillage, nutrient management, and cover crops. And at some of these, there had been surveys of tillage done, but some of those had ceased happening. There are other tools that people are looking at for tillage and cover crops, for example, remote sensing. But I think that getting as much other information on the ground implementation is also critical. And certainly on the nutrient management side, other than kind of state level sales data or our animal unit numbers, but on the commercial side, state level sales information, we have little or had little information about in-field nutrient management practices, rate, timing, so forth. So that's where the NREC survey really plays in. Okay. the survey was developed in consultation with the Iowa Nutrient Reduction Strategy science team, and really trying to capture as much as many pieces of information about relative to nutrient reduction strategy practices. So this, I won't walk through this, but this is just to illustrate the range of practices on the nitrogen and the phosphorus side. And the NREC survey is really trying to capture as much information on those practices in red on infield nutrient management as possible. And so the questions are really framed around that to try to gather that information on, say, cover crops, on rate of nitrogen, timing of nitrogen, utilization of an inhibitor. And then as we look at the phosphorus side, on that tillage, on cover crops, on how that phosphorus may be applied. So we take that information that Ben talked about, specifically on cover crops, nitrogen management, and nitrification inhibitors as we think about the end load. And we're really glad that we're also trying to capture some information on, say, variable rate technology. Again, as Ben said, that's not a current nutrient reduction strategy approved practice, but there is the possibility it could be in the future. So it's great that we're capturing that because we can always go back and estimate if there's a load reduction impact. So we take the performance that was identified for these specific practices that you can see here. So for cover crops, for rye, it's about a 30% nitrate reduction where we implement cover crops. We use the information on how many acres of cover crops are implemented with that estimated load or concentration and then load reduction to estimate how many pounds or tons of nitrogen or nitrate nitrogen we estimate to be reduced getting into Iowa waters because of the implementation of that practice. So you can see as we look at cover crops, nitrification inhibitor, and timing, we see a reduction. So that, as implementation of those practices, we estimate to reduce nitrate loss to downstream waters. This impact on the load is measured against the estimated load from 1980 to 96, which is the baseline period. If you start to dig into the Iowa nutrient reduction strategy, you may, if you look at the original strategy report, may refer to the baseline period. That was 2006 to 2010. That's what we would call the benchmark period now. But specifically with some NREC resources, we looked at that 86 period to try to estimate nitrate load, phosphorus load. And so we are comparing the load reduction, the modeled load reduction to that 80 to 96 period. That's a bit confusing, but that is. So you can see from the cover crop nitrification inhibitor and timing, or even the N rate to continuous corn, we would estimate we've reduced nitrate loss or delivery from our ag lands compared to the 80 to 96 period. You will note the N rate to corn soybean, even though over the last 7 years we've seen a decline, that nitrogen rate to corn following beans is still higher than it was in the 80 to 96 period. And so we estimate a load increase, at least compared to that baseline period. If we look at phosphorus, modeled phosphorus load, we see greater reductions overall in field to stream loss of phosphorus than what we saw on the nitrogen. We've increased cover crops, we've increased no-till and conservation tillage dramatically since that 80 to 96 period. If we look back in parts of that 80 to 96 period, there probably would have been no-till or hardly any no-till. So we've increased no-till acres substantially since that baseline period. As a result, we estimate about an 18% load reduction in phosphorus delivery from the field to the stream. Okay, similar, we get cover crop reduction. relative to phosphorus load reduction. Same on terrace and wasp cobs as well. These numbers are ones that we're going to also be looking at into the future to try to estimate better the implementation that was in place back in the 80 to 96 period. So these numbers in the future kind of these may be revised because that'll be one of the things we may be working on, or that we are going to work on in the future, is better understanding what the structural practice implementation was in the 80 to 96 period. So this just kind of walks through that we utilize those acres, those rates that Ben reported on before to estimate or model load reductions in nitrogen and phosphorus delivery to the stream based on the performance numbers from the nutrient reduction strategy, the practice performance numbers, excuse me. And then I would just point you back to the Iowa Nutrient Reduction Strategy data dashboard to dig in and find out more information about these various aspects. You can look at some of the changes over time that we see there as well. So with that, I think I will stop and we can answer questions, right, for both Ben and I.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, and if we have any certified crop advisors wanting to collect your CEU, please use the CCA app to scan that code or email me, bgleason@agribiz.org by later this afternoon, and I will put your name on the sign-in sheet and submit it that way. So
there is a question here about the cover crop surveys. Kind of why they're different from the USDA Ag Census data, and that's kind of an active area that Ben and Tom Eisenhart and Dr. Zhu at Iowa State University and Connell, his graduate student, were thinking about trying to look into a little bit more. And so I think one thing is that especially with the USDA Ag Census data, some of those acres are pretty close to the cost share numbers now. So I think that some of those Ag Census data may be on the low side because we definitely know there are acres out there that are implemented outside of cost share dollars. So this is an active area of I would say trying to improve our understanding of maybe why we see some differences in the different data sources that are out there. They all have their advantages and disadvantages. And they're, in many cases capturing different pieces of information. Some of the remote sensing is capturing greenness on the field. So that's a sign of, did the cover crop grow? But we also know, or, are there signs of cover crop growth? But we also know there are acres that are planted that we might not get growth as well because of the weather conditions that we have. So I think that this is, a good point, out there. That we recognize and want to continue to try to better understand.
yeah, we certainly noticed that as soon as those numbers came out. Thought it was a little low. Looked up the cost share numbers, which, like Matt said, the census barely covered. So they have their methodology, we have ours. The remote sensing is a whole nother way to measure things. And like Matt said, we're working with the statistic department, Dr. Zhu and Kunal and Tom Eisenhart, to compare different methodologies and see, where some differences may be. But we're just getting started on that. So for now, we're just speculating. So, but yeah, good question. We certainly noticed that as well. So I guess our next, we have a couple questions here. So this webinar is focused on the survey results. Um, I'm not going to talk about water quality monitoring or anything like that. That's beyond the scope. Matt mentioned those phosphorus numbers. That's a modeled load based on practice adoption. That's different than water quality monitoring. So that's not really relevant to today's webinar. Certainly, if you'd like to follow up, be happy to talk to anyone about things not related to the survey.
Mm.
So any other questions related to survey results? And certainly, I encourage you to go to our website. There's more information about our methodology. All the data from the 7 aggregated data or that has been statistically processed is available there as well. So please, if you have questions, check that out as well.
I'll make one other, I guess, comment about the survey and kind of related to what's reported in the data dashboard. One of the things that we report on the data dashboard is kind of we bin the nitrogen application rates. So you can kind of see a distribution of nitrogen application rates for both corn following beans and corn following corn. So that can be kind of interesting for some folks to kind of see where they're at, and kind of getting back to what Secretary Naig said, kind of benchmarking. I hate all these benchmark, baseline, and this okay, but kind of for individual producers to kind of compare where they might be within that distribution. So rather than just saying, okay, I'm at 165 and that's right on average, you could kind of see where you are in that distribution. I see, Ben, there's one. Are there any other questions you may consider asking in future surveys? And I would say that's always Ben is particularly willing to engage in discussion about questions, adding some questions. And we I'll just say that from the science team, we've kind of asked about some adding some questions, and Ben's been great about that. We also don't want to make it too onerous, right? So that it's there's only 4 liaisons, so I should let Ben answer that, but
Yeah, we every year, especially the survey liaisons, working with those local agronomists, get questions from the agronomists. Why don't you ask about this or that? You look at all the biological products coming. We get a lot of asked about why don't you ask about inhibitors with spring or side dress? But it all comes back to we are looking to collect adoption of practices that have been formally recognized by the science assessment. Sometimes, like variable rate, we try to get a head start, even though it's not been approved. We hope it will. It makes sense that it would get approved, and until we get the data to approve it, but at least by starting early, we can get a baseline on practice adoption for variable rate. But other than that, we kind of just wait until things get added. Uh, I think our most recent addition was adding the small grain rotation question.
that was Ben's point there. In the original nutrient reduction strategy, it was more of a 4-year extended rotation. With scientific review, we identified that the 3-year rotation, corn, soybean, and a year of small grains has some water quality benefit on a nitrate reduction. So that was added. That was then added to the survey as well.
I want to thank all of you for attending today's webinar. We're very excited with the participation today. Thank you for your questions. Like I said, make sure you visit our website. And I really want to thank the ag retailers who are randomly selected and their staff who participate in the survey over the last 7 years. We've got our liaisons will be setting up visits very soon. We start that in January and go as long as it takes to try and at least reach our statistical targets, but also oversample as well. I think with that, we will be wrapping up. But thanks again for attending the webinar. Make sure you visit iowanrec.org. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Roger. Thank you, Secretary Naig, for your participation as well.
Thank you.